And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It's episode 150, some longevity, far more than we could say for the Texans' run defense. It got steamrolled, bulldozed, whatever way you want to put it, by the Tennessee Titans yesterday. It was not a good game to discuss with you this week, but we've got a good guy to help us out. Radio 610's own and TV's own Mr. Brandon K. Scott. Brandon, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. And I would say the Turn Up for What podcast over the Texans runs defense right now. You guys, this podcast is better than the Texans run defense. I know that's a low bar, and it might sound like a backhanded compliment, but at the very least, we can all feel good about whatever we're doing. It's better than the Texans run defense. We're all better at our jobs, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's one of the strange games. I'll fire up some. We'll do some quick fire stuff, and then we'll get in a bit more depth. But we'll try and rattle through these ones quite quickly, these points, and then we'll take it from there, right? So, Lovie said after the game they were short-handed. Short-handed because of who and why and what. I don't know the answer to that one.
I have that one for you. I've got that one for you. They were shorthanded. Okay. I think it's a poor excuse for how poorly they played, and I wouldn't use it as a reason for why they played so poorly. I think it's pretty weak to do so. But to be fair, they were shorthanded. I'm looking out there at their second play of the game. Okay, the one where Derrick Henry goes for like 40 yards or 29. It took two plays for Derrick Henry to have a chunk play, right? And out there on your interior, you've got two rookies. They had Kurt Heinisch and Thomas Booker out there together on the second play of the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's in part because they don't have a lot of confidence in any of those guys, any of the interior guys. And why would they? Right? I don't think any of us do. And Malik Collins was out, and he is inarguably their best guy, their best interior guy, either it be against the run or the pass. Like, he's far and away better than anybody else they have on the interior. And so if you wanted to make excuses, and I do not, but if you wanted to,
Yeah.
you could point to missing your unequivocally best interior defensive lineman in this game, and that being part of the reason why you were so poor against the run. Now, I would add that Nico Collins has played in previous games, and they've also been really bad. I mean, we just saw what Josh Jacobs did to this defense the previous week. So it's a poor excuse, but it is technically true that they were shorthanded. And then I'm sure we'll get into the offensive struggles at some point as well.
Yeah.
But the Nico, I'd written a column earlier in the week on sportsradio610.com, essentially declaring Nico Collins as their top wide receiver based off of this year alone. Okay, obviously we know Brandon Cooks is the more accomplished guy and probably their best receiver. But this year, I think that there's a case, and a stronger case, for Nico Collins as being the number one guy. So they're missing their number one receiver. They're missing their number one interior guy. Still not a reason to have, 24 yards in 17 plays or whatever it was. There were really weird numbers like that where you're like, man, this offense is just awful. And obviously they were letting Derrick Henry and Dante Hilliard, by the way, have their way with them. Both of them were able to have their way with the defense.
Yeah, and what was the best comment or best tweet you had from when you're in the press box, or tweet you read about that game? Because Lovey looked abject, the team looked abject, and he, by his own admission, he said we weren't ready.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the best tweet that I saw.
Or best comment somebody. You don't have to say who, but who shouted out in the press
No,
box in,
well,
in, in sheer malaise.
I'll tell you this much. This I'll tell you what the theme of the press box was. But all of us Sports Radio 610 folks kind of sit over there in a corner together, um, to the far end of the sideline, and but even in the common areas when we would see other media people, we, to a man and woman, were discussing: is this the worst game that you've ever seen? Is this the worst? We had all pretty much agreed And it took a while for us to get there, but we all pretty much agreed this was the worst game that we'd ever covered at NRG Stadium in our time, no matter how much time, whether we've been around 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, 20 years. This was right there with the worst game, like in terms of like embarrassment and ineptitude. When you take everything into context, that you were playing against a rookie quarterback who, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Malik Willis looked like a rookie quarterback who was a project, which is what he is. Like, he did not look like he was supposed to be out there starting an NFL game. And you weren't able to take advantage of that with your own offense. Like, think about this. As bad as the defense was, it's 3-0 in the second quarter. And, you've got an opportunity there to still, like, put up some points. Like, the Texans squandered in the beginning of this game a turnover on downs, a botched or a fumbled on a punt, and then their own interception that got them into the red zone, which they got 3 points out of. So, I mean, that's how this game started for them. With all the context, and so that's how bad they were. Like, this was to me perfectly set up for even a competent team. A competent team should have beaten the Titans on Sunday.
Yeah,
any competent NFL team.
Because that was my big takeaway. I don't think Tennessee are particularly good. I just think when you look at the difference between the two teams, there's Derrick Henry, quite a lot of nobodies, but they're just better coached. They understand situational football. They had a game plan. It was very specific, and I tweeted it. I think they'll run it 55 times. They ran it 45. I think they threw it 7 or 8 times. 7 or 8 times too many, because every time they try to throw it, caused them issues. So they're not a functional, rounded offense, but they churn up. Derrick Henry's got over 100 yards in midway through the second quarter. So what do you think? What was Lovie's game plan? What was the offensive defensive game plan? Because I watched it back today and it was fucking horrendous to watch. But I still didn't. I came out partly because he couldn't move the ball. But what was the game plan? What do you think they wanted to do yesterday?
That's a really short conversation about if we're going to talk about Lovie's game plan. Like, I've got a lot of respect for what Lovie Smith's accomplished over the course of his career, and I think that he's worthy of some respect for that. But in terms of, like, if we're just talking about his scheme in a vacuum and game planning, there ain't a lot to it, right? There's not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, it's cover 2 and it's line up and play. And I think that was the game plan. The game plan was to go out there and match the Tennessee Titans level of physicality. And when you break it down, like, it doesn't take a lot of football X's and O's type. Like, you don't have to be a scheme expert to notice what was going on there yesterday. That was on both sides of the ball at that. You mentioned Lovie, but on both sides of the ball, like even the offensive line, on both fronts, it was to a man getting beat by the other man. Just from a physicality standpoint, they could not match it. Like, I'm looking at the touchdown. It's funny, the second touchdown that they score, I guess that's in the third quarter, I believe.
Yeah, fourth and 1, yeah.
And it's like, it's right there at the goal line. It's a goal line stand. They've done a great job on the previous play. Eric Murray, for all of the crap that I know that my station has given Eric Murray over the last 3 years, and rightfully so, because of the sign. The signing was ridiculous and made no sense. But I mean, they benched Jonathan Owens at some point in this game, and Eric Murray's out there and makes a hell of a play at the goal line to keep Derrick Henry out of the end zone and to force a goal line stand there. And then they do the exact opposite on the very next play, the exact opposite of resistance on the very next play. Whereas you or I could have been the running back and scored a touchdown on that play. Like, everybody's pushed down, and it's bad. And then earlier in that drive, what really set that up, I think, was the Dante Hilliard run, the long Dante Hilliard run, where Christian Harris either, I don't know if I should say misreads the play or he's just in poor positioning, but he's in poor position. I think that's fair enough to say. He's not in the right position, whiffs on the plays, not able to get to the guy. He ends up making the tackle 40 yards later. Um, but it was just bad. It was really, really bad. And yeah, I, what was the game plan? I think the game plan was to line up and play, and they clearly had more confidence in the guys up front than any of us did. If they had any expectation of competing, because I mean, you're out there and you're just getting pushed around. I mean, let's just call it what it is. These guys got pushed around. They got bullied yesterday. They got bullied. It was an embarrassment.
Yeah, I think that what I struggle with was a couple of observations I had, and I tweeted out last week. You're just going to have to put 7 or 8 men in the box every play, pretty much, unless it's a 3rd and 15 plus, because there was a 3rd and 9 backed up on the wrong, almost underneath their own goalposts, and they have a delayed handoff, and 3rd and 9's converted by Dontre Hilliard, a guy who we had here, and let go. And it goes back to that point. I don't think Tennessee, particularly on paper, are good, because how many rejects have they got from, DeMarcus Walker made a sack, Dylan Cole's out there making plays. The list is reasonable. Randy Bullock missing a field goal.
The on the Derrick Henry touchdown, the first one, okay, if you go back, I didn't notice this from the press box, but I noticed it rewatching the game. Chris Conley is in there celebrating with him.
Yeah. Chris Conley just got signed this week from the practice squad of the Chiefs. Yeah. So when you look at them on paper, they're just so much more coached than us. They can run the ball at a really solid clip. Pass protection is not great, and they're not going to hang with good teams that have got good edge rushers. But the Texans, particularly Pep Hamilton, I think as well. Anything more than 2nd and 4, he probably shouldn't be running it, because we just can't afford to get behind the chains. And this team's probably got a 3 or 4 yard negative margin getting what they include and what they've used behind the chains, because there is no downfield passing attack. Don't stretch the field. The defense just kept creeping up, and they just couldn't run the ball. And I put an article out during the week last week, Brandon. I said how does the offense operate? If you can't run the ball, the answer is it just can't. It just does not function in any way. It's 1st and 2nd down to get you 4 or 5 yards, and then hopefully you can make a couple of short gains, and every so often you might scrape some points. But when you get the ball at the 11 and the 43 and only come away with 3 points, you're not going to win. And as simple as that. They got turnovers, still wasn't enough. They couldn't stay off the field. Tennessee ran down their throat. But the second point was you got to stack the box, and we're sitting against Derrick Henry, and we're in nickel, and you think these guys can't tackle, these guys aren't physical enough. We have no kind of box, kind of safety, kind of hard downhill thumper in our team. It just doesn't exist. We don't have one, and it just was a terrible kind of. It was a terrible watch. But I think when you were saying that about it's the worst game ever, I was like, well, yeah, it probably is. I mean, there's games where I've been more frustrated. I always think that Colts one when we were on that and the playoff and we lost at home, they were kind of in form. Luck was kind of coming back, and that was the most frustrated I've been at a game ever. But yeah, watching that, you almost have an abjectness to it, because you kind of half expect it. But I suppose it begs the question, Brad, has this team got worse from last year? Not on the scoreboard, but to watch I think it's worse.
It's another question that was asked in the press box. You asked earlier about the biggest tweet or observation of someone from the game. The conversations were, is this the worst game that you've ever seen or been a part of, been to, followed closely? And is this team worse than last year? It was actually my guy, Cody Davis, that from the Locked On Texans podcast, who's at the game with us as well, mentioned that kind of in passing, like, man, I think this team is worse than last year's. And I haven't wanted to entertain that at all, because I've been saying since the preseason, since the draft, really, that I expected them to be better, that I expected them to make some incremental improvements just based off of the young talent alone. Just based off of the infusion of young talent alone, I thought they would be better. But and I'm not giving up on the rookies necessarily. That's not what I'm saying. But more so, what seems to have materialized so far is that they're really only better at like one position, or 2 positions. Like, they're better. I think that the Texans are better at running back, okay, with Dameon Pierce, and they're better at cornerback
Yeah.
with the combination of Steven Nelson and Derek Stingley. But like, are they worse in some, like, I think they're worse at tight end, like just or not in terms of talent, but the fact that they don't do anything with them at all. Like, I think that they're wasting OJ Howard. Like, it seems like every time they try to get him the ball, good things happen, but they don't do it nearly enough. I think the linebackers are much worse. And Christian Harris has not really shown, at least yet, to be the difference maker that was the sort of the anticipation when it's like, oh, they're about to put Christian Harris out there, and I'm someone who's excited about him, but not after not after that Titans game. I was going to give him a pass for the Raiders game, his first game, but that Titans game, man, I mean, I didn't see some of the, like the athleticism and instincts that I was hoping to see based off of what I saw in college and the way that he's been kind of talked about and billed leading up to this. So to answer your question, yes, like it feels like Davis Mills feels worse. Brandon Cooks is worse. Um, the linebackers are worse. The defensive line feels worse. The offensive line doesn't feel like a lot better, like significantly better. Like the offensive line might be better, but what is that? I mean, that's not really saying much. And they have like critical mistakes, like critical moments. I think overall the line's been better, but they'll have like a critical penalty or give up a critical play. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I hadn't entertained it that they could be worse. And sure enough, 7 games in, they look worse. The biggest thing that surprises me, that the coaching seems worse.
Yeah. Where does that leave? Where does that leave this coaching staff then? Because I mean, the camera zoomed, I don't know if you saw the broadcast view back, but when the camera zoomed on him, he's pretty cool in front of the camera, in front of pressure, Lovie, and I think we've kind of been sort of not fooled, but certainly there's been a kind of level of comfort because he's not been a bumbling idiot like the last head coach in front of the microphone. But he was pretty frank in his admission that it was not good enough in every facet of the ball, which, he has to say, I suppose there's no option otherwise. But just the look in his eye when he was on the field, you knew from very early on this game was, and his exact words were, "We were never in it," and that was evident for a guy that's really cool and really kind of straight faced. It was written all over his face yesterday, I thought, when he was watching the game there, and I don't know if that was a lack of ideas, an admission of defeat, or whatever it was, but that was the first time I looked at him and thought, you're out your depth here potentially in this new era of football.
When the Texans want to be competitive, when they really want to start winning games and be serious, I think they are going to need a new coaching staff. So let's just start with that. I think they're going to have to get a new coaching staff, preferably someone whose ideas are a little bit more progressive and along the lines of the way things are trending now in the NFL. And I say that with respect to what Lovie Smith has done in his career. But I think when they want to be serious, they're going to need a new coaching staff, and that when they are serious, they are going to get a new coaching staff.
Do you think he could be one and done? Because games like yesterday, when you're 1-5-1, holding on to that tie,
this
could
is
he
what
be
I'm
done?
getting at. This is what I'm getting at. I don't know when they're supposed to be serious. Like, I know they're supposed to have, they still got the new picks from the Deshaun Watson trade. I know they're supposed to have more money to be able to do stuff in free agency. But like, is the expectation next year that they want to compete, that they are going to actually make some moves of substance? Okay, not run it back with the free agents that you brought in last year when you knew you weren't going to do anything, and just infuse the team with young talent, but like actually spend some money on good players. And obviously what happens with this draft is consequential. So like, I don't know what the expectation is next year. If they're content with running it back with Lovie Smith because they don't expect to be much better than they were or have been this year. And then also the political element to it that's complicated. Yeah. The whole reason why they hired Lovie Smith in the first place, I think, is something that we all have to keep in mind when we get caught up in the football of it. Like for football reasons, we all kind of looked around and were like, what are they doing? Lovie Smith, Josh McCown, like they're wasting our time with all of this, like what's going on?
Yeah.
And this is what they ended up going with because of how everything fell with the Brian Flores lawsuit.
Yeah.
So the question is, can they, with on the heels after hiring Lovie Smith on the heels of the Brian Flores lawsuit, can they therefore go back to back years, one and done, firing a black head coach? Which is an uncomfortable question, I know, for most people, but I think is a relevant one just based off of the fact that they went and did this to begin with. Like they got this lawsuit drops and they feel like they've got and they've done a one and done situation with a black coach, and a black coach comes out there and has a lawsuit out there that's raising all these issues, and then do it again, reinforces some of the points that are being made in that lawsuit. I don't know how much that actually plays into it, but I'd be naive to think that that's not a factor, and the optics of it, given how they hired Lovie Smith, wouldn't play into, you know, the idea of firing this guy one and done, and to what end? Are they again, going back to my original point? Are they supposed to be competitive next year? Are they going to be good? Like, to firing them for what? You know, um, like,
Yeah.
aside from, like, we're looking at it and saying, hey, this is not good. These guys don't look inspired. The game planning just looks kind of, haphazard at best. Like they're just going out there lining up and playing. The offensive play calling is unimaginative. Guys aren't getting open. Like, it just looks bad. But what's the expectation? What are they trying to accomplish right now? I think is also like a relevant question, and
Yeah.
something that I'd love to know the answer to.
Yeah, I think he'll be here another year because, like, I mean, ultimately, within the confines of the league, the salary cap's not in a great spot next year. It's better, but it's not in a great spot. So, like, and even if you hit right at the top of the draft, you're probably only going to be able to bring in 4 to 5, if you're lucky, guys that can make a difference. And that's not enough to improve this team, regardless if you clear out and bring in new. And even if every single signing you brought in was incrementally better in the way you've gone from Mitchell, who was on the other team yesterday, to if you got incrementally better from Mitchell to Nelson. If you did that in every single position that you signed somebody new, plus 4 or 5 difference makers, I still don't think it's enough. I think what's the point of bringing a new coach, and what new coach that's going to be credible and potentially successful is going to want that? But 2 questions that I had just running through my mind when you were talking there. One, why do you think they've not been as competitive as they imagine they would be? Because where does that gap occur? Because that's I think a point I think is quite interesting.
I mean, I think it starts with Davis Mills and Pep Hamilton. To me, like, I thought that, like, I wasn't a big believer in Davis Mills, but I was intrigued by the way his season ended last year. I was accepting of the fact that he was going to be the guy that they were going to go with for this year. And if they were going to do that, I liked the idea of pairing him with Pep Hamilton, who speaks sort of the same language of offensive philosophy and scheme, with their backgrounds from Stanford. Like, I feel like they come from the same place. And so I thought that if you were going to do some type of brief experiment with Davis Mills and try to build on what you saw from him in his rookie year, that pairing him with Pep Hamilton would be beneficial to him, and that we would see some improvement. We have not. We have not. Like, Davis Mills has not really shown himself to be a difference maker, and Pep Hamilton has not either. And to me, that is what is sort of the main, like, most striking thing. I don't think we had a huge expectation from this receiving core of being like an elite receiving core, but as mentioned earlier, Brandon Cooks feels like he's regressed or is disinterested, or I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put the disinterested label on him, but it just feels very different with him out there. And so I would say those are 3 key. The guy who's supposed to be your best wide receiver, your quarterback, and your offensive coordinator just have not been. It's just been not good, lackluster. And to me, that's the biggest thing. Obviously, the defensive issues, they haven't been able to stop the run in 3 years, and they're just as bad and probably worse. I would say worse at it this year. And so that stands out. I don't know if we anticipated them being worse.
Yeah.
Probably didn't think they'd be necessarily that much better, but there was some hope there. You drafted really good defensive players, right? You spent the number 3 overall pick on Stingley, which, that was only going to do but so much. And, he's been okay. He's been fine. And then the Petrie thing, the Jalen Petrie thing, man, everybody was on that in the preseason in those first couple of games, right? Like, he was amazing. And you're like, oh, man, okay, we got some defensive players. Christian Harris is going to come back, at some point. And so now, and none of that has been worth the damn. And Roy Lopez just kind of, you feel like he's kind of just a plug and play guy. That was a feel good story last year as a rookie. Oh man, a late round pick as a starter. Well, sure he is on a terrible team, and he's an okay player. But I mean, like I think there was a little bit more built up on that story. The kind of a feel good story, and his personality is endearing. And so I think people kind of liked that. But it's like, okay, but you're not really good at that position. Like you don't, you've got a guy that can be a serviceable rotation guy in the league there, which good for you. But fast forward to the end of the season. It's fast forward to this season when Derrick Henry's back and he's running all over you like he used to do. Josh Jacobs is running all over you like he used to do. Khalil Herbert looks like Gale Sayers against you after the starter goes. When David Montgomery goes out and Khalil Herbert all of a sudden looks like the best running back you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. It's like, what's going on here, guys?
And I think that's probably a bit of an underrated point there. I think in terms of, try and cover a lot of those again, but I think like the front seven, I think, and that's the bit about when the question, why is there a big chasm in terms of what they expected versus what's output? And for me, I think when you look at the certain areas, like skill positions, didn't sign anyone of note, may not have been able to for whatever reason. The defensive line, edge, apart from Rasheem Green, who's okay, I think, Jerry Hughes, okay, he got another sack yesterday, but I don't think it makes him any good. I don't think he's just continually runs upfield past the play. But I think at the defensive tackle spot, which was a weakness, bringing back Malik Collins, because Malik Collins for me is like a third guy you bring in as a designated pass rusher at the middle. I don't think he's an every down guy, but he's by far your most hope. But they didn't do anything apart from bring him back, and we were already bad with him last year. We're ever so worse without him. But I think there's skill positions on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball up front. Didn't bring anybody in or draft anyone high that was going to make a difference. Now I don't and we'll come on to some of the rookies and stuff in a bit. But I think in the offensive side, really again, you've got Tim Kelly on the other side there, and I think the biggest criticism of that scheme was the run game. You never found things you were proficient at, and this run game is pretty much the same in terms of varying principles. They do a lot of kind of sort of power plays with the guard or the tackle pulling, and it has worked, and it's been much better, I think, over the piece. But what really frustrates me is if you think of all the big plays that Pierce has had, and Pierce is by far the silver lining of the season, I think. But if you think of all the good plays they've had, they're all stretch counter, outside zone plays, or sweep tosses. To the tailback, if you think of the big touchdown he had against Chargers yesterday, there was one in last week against Vegas. The best plays have been when the offensive linemen are pulling at space, and they don't do that. They don't do it enough. And I just think when you look at the play calling from Pep, it's not been good enough. And look, the first interception was not on Davis. It was a poorly executed pick play. Two tight ends basically picked each other off rather than defensive back that goes right into his chest. And Davis is okay. And I think when you saw it yesterday, and I think if you ever needed to do it, you had a bit of an upturn last week. And okay, it was good to watch at times, and there is some nice bits there. But ultimately, when there's no run game, when it's on his shoulders, he doesn't have that playmaking ability to be considered. And I don't think that should be a debate against the sensible of us, amongst us that are watching this. I think some people still hold out blind faith and hope that he can be better than that. But I think yesterday was a reminder that it's just average to below average all the way around. And when you compile that together, we're seeing young players out there who are still finding their way, making some really bad mistakes at times. It's just a sorry mess, and I wonder how we get better at that, because I think that's the issue. How do we get better? How do we get from here to mildly competitive? Say we're winning 3 or 4 wins, and I don't know the answer to that, because I think there is so many holes. I don't know where you start to try and plug them.
I mean, we were pretty brutally honest about it yesterday. Honestly, like I think I told Seth Payne, it's like, hey man, I think everybody could go. I think they could get rid of everybody. And
I'd get rid of the whole front seven and not worry about it.
I could get. I told Seth Payne, they could get rid of everyone except the rookies, and I'm really just talking about the main ones, right? And so they could get rid of it, but fine, just keep the rookies anyway, just for the hell of it. All of them. Let's say that. Yeah. They could get rid of everybody except the rookies and Nico Collins. And those would be the only players that I feel like I just have to have. I like Steven Nelson. I like Desmond King. Like there's some random players. I was going to say Troy Hairston, but he's a rookie too. So there are some random players that I like on the team, but they could get rid of every single one, and I would shrug my shoulders. And coaches too, for that matter. They could get rid of. They could just start over. And obviously they're not going to do that, right? You can't get rid of everybody. It's kind of hyperbole there, but. That's how we felt, though. Talking about how do you get from here to there? Like there is no, we are done trying to beat our brains around. How does this team improve? This team's not good enough. Like these coaches aren't getting. You laid it out just now about some of the things that they do well and that they don't do enough, and kind of how they don't even do a good job of necessarily leaning into their strengths. I do think that they've done a better job of trying to just make sure that Dameon Pierce is the focal point of their offense. Like, I mean, it didn't take rocket science to figure that out. But in terms of like this outfit, this group of folks, how do we get from here to there? I just don't think they're good enough. Like, I think they can be like, to their credit, I was going to call it Oakland, the Raiders game, the previous game. I thought that was Davis Mills, one of his best games, one of the best games that I've seen him have. And it wasn't like he was special, but I thought he was efficient. I thought it was one of his better moments until, we get to this week and we're like, a question for me. How do you make him, how do you improve his repeatability? Like, how do you make him do it again? Like we've seen him have moments, right? Is it the Chargers game last year, the Patriots game? Like there's a handful of games where you're like, okay, how do you get him to do that again? Like in the San Francisco game, how do you get him to do that again against Tennessee on Sunday? How do you get that to be consistent? And it might not be there.
I think it's the game script when they come out, right? I think that's just not there. I think how many easy layup throws has he had this year? 9 times out of 10 he has made them, but he's a rhythm passer. So without getting him into a rhythm early, which he did in Vegas. And that was clear. I think it was the one I tweeted out. It was the one to Jordan Akins on a third down. He kind of sort of laid it up past the I think it was the safety that was on him, and he dropped it in just over his shoulder. And Jordan Akins ran on and got some yak yards there. And it kind of seemed to all stem from there. And I think without that spark, he struggles. Because I think there was 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter yesterday. And they had 64 yards on 33 plays. So regardless of your view, regardless of anything about his evaluation, there is no way a quarterback who's capable of consistently playing in this league can have his name next to that. And you get that last drive in garbage time where they're kind of sitting off, getting a bit soft. It's an easy gift to pad the stats. It makes it. I mean, it's still a terrible, terrible day. As they said in the commentary, one of the worst offensive displays you'll ever see. But I think there's a lack of. There's a reason why the last time Pep called plays, it was in the XFL or whatever the hell it was, that league. There's a reason why he got fired with Andrew Luck. You'd like to think, a generational talent, you could sort of look serviceable. And I just think, there's a lack of easy play. There's a lack of the thing I've had with Pep all season is lack of utilisation of weapons at the right time. And how many times are we going to not convert a 3rd and 1? How many times are we going to run it on second, medium to long, and put? I think he's put Davis in bad positions. And look, that's fine, and he's not done as well. But his talent would only take you so far. So everything has to go right. There has to be a groove for both of them. I think people glamorized in their head, similar to Lovie in that way, what Pep could do for this offense. Because actually, if you look at it, really, Tim Kelly was a better play caller. Tim Kelly's more creative. Tim Kelly got better chunk plays downfield, even in bad games. So actually, if you were to compare, he's probably laughing to himself because if the rumors are to be true that they wouldn't sack Tim Kelly, and it was a bit of bullshit, but he wouldn't sack Tim Kelly. So then David Culley said, "No, I'm out too." Then if you sack my play caller or whatever it was, But actually, you would have been better having him here. So I think, there's just a lack of cohesion in offense and a lack of. What do they do well? What's the sort of 2 or 3 things they do? And as I said, I think they run outside zone stretch plays well, but they don't do it very much, And I think, but ultimately, as Lovie said, I think this team is so fucking fundamentally flawed because they get it handed to them in the trenches. And in fact, let's put it out there now. Kenyon Green was fucking terrible yesterday. Awful. He was awful. He was absolutely awful. Scott Quisenberry was worse next to him, and we had Casey McDermott, and I don't know who the hell that is. He was in there towards the end of the game because McRae had a terrible game. McRae's not an NFL lineman.
McRae was also concussed too, which happens.
Yeah, because he went off.
Happen.
Yeah.
And whenever it seems like whenever he gets in the game, something like that happens. I hope he's okay, but it seems like that happens a lot.
And so the 3 internal guys got worked by Jeffrey Simmons. Kenyon Green got used like a pinball to stop a play. The battering ram that banged into Dameon Pierce at one point.
Yeah, so Jeffrey Simmons tackled Dameon Pierce with Kenyon Green. So he used Kenyon Green to tackle him. Yeah.
So that tells me his functional playing strength is nowhere near. His footwork has been terrible for weeks, and I don't know if it's because and I think you need to be more critical of Kenyon, and because he's missed a lot of time. That's not his fault. But he was a 15th overall pick over guys like Jordan Davis, who would be a perfect guy to have in this defense right now. Kyle Hamilton's probably not been as great, but he's made plays. And he's definitely better than one of your safeties. Like one that got benched, he brought back, the much maligned Derek Murray. So I think the internal 3 guys let this whole thing down yesterday. They couldn't run it, but I think when Kenyon Green is a 15th year overall pick, fair enough. Jeff Simmons, one of the top 5-6 players in the league at that position on his day. Arguably, only second to Errol Donald. But when Tier Tart, or whatever his name is, a 3rd-year guy at Florida International, is working past you and getting to the quarterback and pushing you back and driving into your quarterback's lap, that's a concern at this stage. And I think when you spend a big pick like that, just like it's the free agency signings, you have to hit. You have to hit on all these 6 picks you got for the Deshaun trade. Otherwise, you've got no semblance of a squad. And so far, after some decent flashes in the run game, but the last 2 weeks he's dropped right off. And look, it's going to be ups and downs. It's learning curves. That's fine. Get it all out your system now, Kenya, for next year. But I just thought he looked miles off it yesterday, and that's worrying for a 15th overall pick, particularly at that position.
Yeah, he did look miles off. I'm not worried about it, though. I'm not nearly as worried about him getting worked by Jeffrey Simmons for the most part. And to me, it was his welcome to the NFL moment. I'll give you this. I will give you this though. I think Kenyon Green's going to be fine ultimately in the long run. I think he'll be a fine player, but the miss is going to be not taking Jordan Davis. I think that's going to be one where we're going to look back. I know he's kind of been more of a rotational guy, but I think he's going to be between him. Okay, think about it like this.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing the best front in football right now, and we'll see him on Thursday.
But look at the players that are taken in that window where they had that pick, right? Yeah. They trade back to take Kenyon. But Jordan Davis is taken with the pick that they had. Kyle Hamilton is taken with the next pick, and then they take Kenyon Green, right? That's the sequence. Well, who's going to be the best player out of those 3? I feel like it's going to be Jordan Davis. And who had the pick that you could have taken Jordan Davis? The Texans did. So I will give you that much. But no, there's no arguing that it was a welcome to the NFL moment. He did not look good at times, was getting washed. Now, like you said, Questenberry was worse, and that actually stood out to me more so than Kenyon. But Kenyon's more important, right? Because he is the first round pick, the pick from the Deshaun Watson trade, and you do absolutely need him to be good. Like maybe part of my projection there is some hoping, like, yeah, man, he's gonna be good because damn it, he's got to be. Like, you can't waste that pick, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it, but yeah, man, it was not a good. That's gonna be some tape that he'll definitely want to flush, but one that we won't forget until he like rectifies that.
I think it's 2 weeks in a row because who was the guy that got traded to the Cowboys last week from Vegas? He kicked him about last week, and he's going to see him again this year. I think it's 2 weeks in a row. I think when you have an off week, and look, I think Jalen Petrie had that. He had two kind of not great weeks. I thought he was better in fits. Still misses tackles, still needs to improve form. Your shoulder's not the best means of tackling somebody, and you really need to learn that and absorb that. And every time you go up to the line of scrimmage to go make a tackle. But I think there was there was too much. I think Petrie played better, and I think he's definitely had his downs the last 2 weeks. But certainly Kenyon has been bad in that, and it just basically destroyed the offense because of it. It's such a finely balanced thing that if they don't run the ball, they can't function because you've not got a playmaker, and you've not got playmakers at the skill positions beyond Dameon Pierce.
I wanted to mention though, like, I'm glad you're going kind of breaking down some of these rookies because I think that's the most important part of the evaluation about the team this year. Like, it's hard not to get caught up in the wins and losses in the day-to-day because, I mean, like, we're watching the games. We're here to watch football, and we love the games. But I don't think any of us had any expectation of them being super competitive this year. But I will say, like, what seems really frustrating about it is when, and I get Malik Willis was out there. The rookie was out there yesterday, and it wasn't Tannehill. Tannehill's not great. But Tennessee comes in there yesterday or on Sunday, and you're like, man, this is the division win. This is going to be the division winner. That team's going to be the one that's going to go to the playoffs. The Colts were a team that people liked at the time. The Jaguars early in the season were a team, for whatever reason, people liked at a time. And you just think about overall this division. And the thing that I'm having just a tough time with, even though, like, I'm keeping focus on the task at hand here. We're evaluating the rookies and the young talent development, coaching, which is not good, right? Like, we can see that. But just from an overall, like, bigger picture standpoint of the team, you're like, yeah, I get they weren't supposed to be competitive this year, but, like, why not? When you look at what their competition is, like,
when you look at like Atlanta, I think like Atlanta, Detroit, it's all more watchable, and it's far more. They've got a bona fide. Arthur Smith is a great play caller. We saw that at Tennessee. He's getting a good tune out of that offense, winning games, competitive, interesting. I mean, Detroit, we need them to win a game, and I hope they do at some point because they're in games, and you see it. But there's teams like that do it. But and the losses don't bother me, and I think it's just when, like, for example, I've said this for pretty much all the off season, and now Davis Mills was handed a chance that I don't think he necessarily earned. And wholly, he certainly didn't. Nobody should earn a chance to not have somebody truly to compete with you. And it's kind of the same for Christian Harris because I kind of feel like when I watched it back today, because I had people around on the barbecue, you get handing out beers and stuff, so you miss a lot. And I've kind of tried to make it more of an enjoyable Sunday rather than watching the game. I miss probably 30% of the plays sometimes. But when you watch it back today, I think Christian Harris it's just been handed to him, and he has not been good the last two games. And I think that's, I know the whole linebacker core is not. Camus walks out the door because he's unhappy about a rookie getting it, and I kind of see where he's coming from. Don't get me wrong, Grugier Hill was not good, and he had one good play on that tight end that they got from Minnesota. I won't try to pronounce his name because I've never done it prior to now. But he made that an early play earlier on, looked okay in coverage, went to tackle the tight end, got off the field. I think that was on the second drive. And then, I think it was just one of those things. I think Harris is out there, and I'm not quite sure why, and I don't think he's earned it. and he's not played well. So nothing kind of adds up for that. Just throwing him in to the fire, played however many, 70% of snaps last week. It was 68. Similar number, higher this week. I don't think he's managing him well. It's a transition, and to miss all that time, to miss the first 5 weeks of the season, to hardly be at training camp, and then to throw him out there, he's maybe learning on the job, but it ain't pretty, and it's adding to the overall woes.
Yeah, but again, like, it goes back to my earlier question, like, what are they trying to accomplish? Like, at this point, they're not going to be good. They're not going to really win, and I think they are willing to. And I actually would agree with this part, that being willing to live and die with your young players at this point. Like, no, he has not earned it. Like, you're right, He has not earned it. But the thing that he has, or the reason why he's in this position, is simply because they drafted him, and because the guys that have earned it aren't any good. Like, the guys who have earned it are also bad. So, like, maybe you'd like to see more of a Neville Hewitt or Blake Cashman or somebody like that for in the immediacy. But I think what we're looking at, and this is sort of just part of the process. I hate that term, the process.
It's a process.
But what is part of the process is developing and evaluating the guys that you've invested in. And I know it's a 3rd round pick on Christian Harris?
Yeah, and a trade up, yeah. Or no, second. They traded in the second, didn't back in the second for him,
Yeah. So, I get it. It's not like, a top 5 pick or anything, but I mean, that's a pretty decent investment in a guy like that. And I think they're just trying to let him sink or swim. I am fine with sinking or swimming with the results. It's also why I was fine with Davis Mills, who also, I agree with you, had not earned it. I don't think he'd earned it worth a damn. I agree with you. But to me, the philosophy there was, these are the young players that we have at this position, and we want to both evaluate and develop these players for better or worse. And it felt like the approach, and that's why it's also frustrating, because it's like, it felt like the approach was to just go all in with these younger players, which I'm okay with, but also looking at how bad the division is. It's like, hey, man, if you actually did give it to guys who earned it and are actually good, and actually tried to, like, scout and find good players. And honestly, the coaching has been an overall letdown, a huge letdown. I personally had high hopes for it. Or, I wouldn't say high hopes, but better than this. I thought it'd be better than this. And so when you just bring that together, it's like, okay, they're investing in young players, and their coaching staff isn't as good as maybe I wanted it to be, and here's what we have.
But I think if you're going to do that everywhere. If you're going to go in with that approach, and I agree with it, because it's a good time to do it. But I don't know how long or how much further ownership's going to accept the current product, I think. So there's a balance there, because they want to save their jobs. But if you're going to do that approach, go everywhere. Give Jimmy Morrissey a start at centre. He's a young player. Give Austin Deculus. When I had when I had the guy from LSU on in the offseason, he said, I think he could be a great guard in a power system. I know he looks like a tackle when he plays, but, kick him inside and give him a go. What did you learn yesterday by playing Justin McCray? Deculus is inactive. There's so many examples of okay, if you want to go down that approach, I nod my cap to you. But do it everywhere and give everybody a fair crack rather than select players. Get Wallow out there, 78% of the snaps. Whatever it might be, give Brevin Jordan more snaps over something like Jordan Aikens. Why have you got both on the field? The whole point was he was to transition and replace him. You let him go, and Aikens comes back and he's your best player. Jaleel Johnson comes in yesterday and actually looked probably one of the better players in the interior. Who, he was here last year, but he was on a practice squad. You bring him to try and help a little bit, and he did. But it's small margins of where you are and where you need to be to stop a guy like Derrick Henry. So I think it was interesting. But I think Christian Harris out there, he's maybe being hung out to dry right now. After missing so much time, I understand if he got full preseason, but maybe just bed him in gently, because ultimately, but he's got the same, and it's partly the way they're being coached at the linebacker spot, and the linebacker coach name escapes me, but the amount of times they crash downhill.
It's Lovie's son.
Yeah, Miles, of course, yes, of course it is. They crash downhill into the wrong spots. This whole sort of play fast thing's great, but when you leave the edges wide open, then it's not really much of a fair fight. But yeah, any other observations from yesterday? It's probably not too much point dwelling on it, but I think the rookie guys. I thought Stingley missed a lot of tackles, but everybody did. And again, I think that comes down to coaching, scheme, run fits. I don't think they'll get better, and I think there's only going to be more days like that. I think at least the scoreboard was close, and I think that's the only genuine progress I would say. There's been no blowouts this year. There's not been any 40-0 at Buffalo, etc. I think that's probably the only improvement you can take with the rookies sort of kind of learning on the job in the background.
Yeah, yeah. I think my biggest thing is just that it's really it it's more of an energy kind of sucker. Like it sucks the energy out of the building when you go there, and you're all you really want to watch is a competitive football game, an interesting football game. And I'll even give them credit for like who would imagine that however many weeks later, 6, 7 weeks later, after that tie to open the season against the Colts, and as frustrating as that was to watch and to be like in the building for, that you'd be longing for a game like that where it's at least like I know it collapsed at the end, epic collapse at the end there of that game, but you're like, oh well, they at least started the first couple of quarters pretty good. It was probably the best Pep Hamilton's been all year. It was the first 3 quarters of the game, or I'm sorry, the first 3 quarters of the season, and it's been bad ever since.
Yeah.
But yeah, like where's that at?
Yeah.
For 3 quarters this year, I was like, yeah, okay. Now I know they collapsed, but maybe there's something here. Maybe this could be a competitive team, and they have been competitive for the most part, or at least the score would indicate so. They weren't. I don't think they were competitive their last 2 games. I don't give a damn what the score says, but yeah, I mean that was the takeaway, is that here we've gotten to a point where they're going out and not just losing, but playing uninspiring football. They don't look like they want to be there, and the people that are there for leisure don't look like they want to be there.
Well, there's not many people there. I think I don't know what it looked. Yeah,
there were not.
And was that was that markedly less than there has been, just because people just have lost interest again? The Astros are on, etc. Or was it a lack of travel and support, or what did you think made up the difference in the crowd? Because it looked really empty, and you saw actually when it showed you the end zone camera with that, like Brandon Cooks got that late catch, and I mean you'd be lucky if there was maybe 10,000 in the stadium at that point. Towards it.
Yeah, but man, it wasn't. It never looked full or like anything close to it. It was like that to start the game. It was a light crowd, which I was surprised by, kind of based off of the parking. Like there was a little bit of traffic in the parking lot, a little bit more so than there had been in previous games. So I thought, okay, maybe people are coming out because the Titans are the old Oilers. Oddly enough, because of that, there are Titans fans that live here in this city, because of that awkward kind of relationship. They are technically the old team from here, So I was expecting to see kind of a nice mix of Texans and Titans fans, kind of and there was some of that, but not nearly as what you would expect it to be. And yeah, the crowd was whack before the game even started, and then people started leaving once once you got Rex Burkhead throwing the ball on. Was that a third down play? I'm trying to remember if that was a third.
I think so, yeah.
I think it was. And you start the game off with a flea flicker screen to the tight end, like, come on, guys, like let's pick it up, and I think that was reflective in the crowd. And yeah, man, the energy, the energy level to me was at like an all-time low. That to me feels worse. Like we can debate about whether this team is worse than last year's.
Yeah.
The energy at Sunday's game, worse than anything that I've seen in, minus COVID situation where there weren't people there, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like anything that I've seen last year, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my reference point from last year, and booked up a trip this year, and I actually genuinely didn't want to go to NRG for the trip because, yeah, like last year against the Jets after Thanksgiving, it was a non-event, and we left our seats, I think, at the third quarter and just kind of went and had a drink and watched a bit on the screen, and then, got a head start on the traffic. But So so that's why wanted to go to Dallas this year. But yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think so. It's going to take time. It was a process. Major undertaking was next thing. But I don't think Caserio can be immune for criticism. You put the botch coaching stuff aside, but the salary cap management, the player acquisition of free agents, draft, it takes time. So you can't really say on that, but free agents you can. There's a reason why people don't spend free agency, because it really hits. But I think Nick has to take his share of the blame here, because even if he went and drafted, say, I've forgotten the name now, the big guy up front for Georgia.
Jordan Davis.
No, this year, saying the real deal guy. He's even better than Jordan, far better than Jordan Davis. I've forgotten his name now. Yeah, it escapes me. And if you put him out there and you draft Will Anderson, say for example, even if you bring both those guys in here, that doesn't improve this. You can't rely on rookies to improve your needs, because it's going to take time regardless of where you pick them in the draft. So you can get them out there early and play, but I think next season has got a propensity, or certainly a projection, to be very similar to this year, just not as bad as what. So I think you went from the blowouts to non-blowouts but bad performances, to next year it might be okay performances but still losing. I think you've seen the Jags are potentially in the running to have the first pick, or a top 2 pick 3 years in a row. I don't think we should rule ourselves out of that potential from last year, this draft, and the following year, because it takes a while to take that step. And I think when you watch a team who's not great but are just really good at one thing, and you can't stop it, and you can't compensate for other areas because you lack of talent, it takes a while to build that out. And I think you're going to have probably a reasonable overhaul of this roster, I think.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say right now that Nick Caserio hasn't done a good enough job of putting this team together, back to back year, in year 2.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are even having a valid discussion on, is this team worse than the year before? Like, you can't, I mean, I don't care what your plan is. If you're the general manager, you can't be putting out a team that's worse than the year before, and the team that you got wasn't any good. Like, unless you're inheriting the good team and you're tearing it down from there. But Nick Caserio inherited the team that was already bad.
Yeah.
So like, obviously they start to tear down, and you make the case that year 1 was actually year 0, but you can't be getting worse. You can't be going backwards. So I think that's a fair criticism.
So it was Jalen Carter, number 88.
Jalen Carter. I looked it up.
Who is an elite talent, who's a top 5 pick at defensive tackle all day long. Like when you watched him last year, clear standout of defense. He was better than Trayvon Walker. He was better than Jordan Davies. So I think that's the type of guys you're going to need to get into that defensive line to change it, with some vets who are space eaters. Otherwise, we're just going to be watching the same. The scar you can't hide is what I called it last week. You're just going to, until you can start defending a run game, the rest is kind of irrelevant, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just makes me think of DJ Reader and how they gave
his
money.
And that's it. I had that in my notes. Funny you say that. I had that in my notes last week, and I forgot to mention it to John. I think that's potentially of all the guys they've let go, maybe Brandon Brooks is maybe another one, but I mean, he had some health issues and it kind of muddied his career. Ben Jones is a great reminder, playing centre, still going strong at 36 or whatever he is. But yeah, DJ Reader was one of those guys that just made such a difference. Do you remember when Derek Newton, going back a bit, do you remember when Derek Newton got injured? I was there in Denver and he tore both these knees or whatever he did, going up against Von Miller. And the difference that made to that line the rest of the season was just marking, because it just wasn't a replacement. And I think when you get guys like that who are quality kind of starters to with potential to be difference makers, and look, DJ's had a couple of injuries in Cincinnati, but when he did play, he was in the Super Bowl and he did great. But what a mistake that was. I think that's
a huge mistake. Now
potentially the biggest one. I would maybe go as far as saying the biggest one of the O'Brien era, potentially, in terms of functionality on the field. I think it's just it can't be a position like that can't be underrated when you have a functional player, I think.
Yeah. Now he would be useless on this team at this point. Like, he'd obviously be a great player, but I don't think you need to me, a player like that is, I wouldn't say useless. What it is, he'd be wasted is the word I'm looking for. They would be wasting him if he was still on this team. But mind you, since we're going back, that obviously happened right before everything fell off the cliff. Like, that's part of falling
part of
off
the
the
cliff.
cliff because that that's obviously going into the 2020 season. So yeah, no, that was a huge loss for them. But going back to your point earlier about Caserio, I think that speaks to the question, like the criticism of him speaks to the question that you asked earlier, which is the key question. The question: how do you get from here to there? Like how do you get from what this is to actual competitive and worthwhile football? And the task, is obviously in Caserio's hands, right? Like he's the one who's got to figure that out. And I think it's time to start kind of really, the honeymoon phase should have long been over with once you got to a second head coach, and to me, like that's going to be the pertinent question now. We have a good time talking about the games, but the most pertinent question now is about Nick Caserio and like his aptitude for this, and I'm looking at it and they're supposed to have two premium picks, two top. I don't know how Deshaun's gonna affect things once he comes back, but I don't think that's gonna be a good football team. They're already, what's their record? They've won 2 or 3 games.
They're 2 and they're playing tonight against.
So they're 2-5, right?
Yeah,
they're 2-5. So I mean, they're bad already. They've already lost 5 games. They're going to lose, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated once Deshaun gets back. So that's going to be a bad team. You're going to have 2 top 10 picks, or top 10, top 12 picks. So a lot is being entrusted on Nick Caserio. And to his credit, I do like what he's done with the draft. Like I do like Stingley and Kenyon Green, even though I'm going to have we're going to have these reservations and these conversations for years now.
So
about Sauce Gardner, about Jordan Davis. About the guys that they passed up. I was, the reason why I'm saying this is because I was with them when they did this. So I'm not going to go back and say, oh, they shouldn't have done it. I liked those players at the time. But so, if they don't work, I'll say, hey, I was an idiot too. But, this is just as important, obviously. Like every year that you double pick in the first round is going to be super important to infusing this team with some young talent.
Yeah, no, and I think the point I was going to make there with Stingley is he's a perfect pick. If like yesterday we're going to go, right, guys, the game plan is we're going to stick 8 men in the box. We're just going to go man for man in the back end, and you've just got to give us everything you can because he's the perfect player for it. Nelson's decent at it as well. You could have said to pick your other best cover guy. It might even be Eric Murray if you think he's better cover guy than those guys, and you play cover 3, and then you just and man, and then you just jam the line all day. And if they hit you in behind, so be it. But at least it's not the most predictable, because ultimately, and that probably leads us nicely into Thursday night's game, which is going to be a fucking mess as well. Let's be honest. I mean, you never know. Sometimes these games on a short week and a short rest, teams got to travel, can sometimes put in adverse performances, or can't perform in the adverse conditions, as I say rather. But when you think. The issue was before, because you had T.Y. Hilton for all those years. You had, then you've got Henry now, who is just, complete control over every time he plays us. A.J. Brown was on that similar track, so I think this is a good time to see, as a good test at this point in the season to see where Sting's up to in terms of going against A.J. Brown, because I think he hit 3 long touchdowns yesterday. So there's going to be, when you pick these players, they're not being utilised in very well. And that's Lovie being stuck in his principles, etc. But Thursday night, to the point, Brandon, I've got no expectations of this game even being close. And I think you're going against an undefeated team, so on paper it's a terrible mismatch. But again, they run the ball with a good offensive line, and they're going to kick. They're going to move bodies up front. I think it's almost an identical. They'll probably watch that game and thinking, let's just run the ball successfully, short to medium throws, and we'll take our deep shots and see where it takes us. But yeah, I think this could be. I think a 3-scorer minimum. I think it's got the potential anyway to be that way.
Yeah, I think the Eagles. Let's see. Sorry about that. I think that the Titans are basically a poor man's Eagles.
Yeah, no, I think and they're scripted that way.
And the difference is, though, so the Titans are a poor man's Eagles, but they have Derrick Henry. And the Eagles are basically a rich man's Titans, but they don't have a Derrick Henry, like that. So, but stylistically, yeah, I mean, this is going to be I think a carbon copy of kind of the ass beating that we just watched.
And I think what's worse is I think there's a legitimate argument. I've not watched a huge amount of them. I just kind of watched a lot some of their games back this morning. I think they've potentially got the best defensive front in football right now. So
Yeah.
those three internal guys, talking about a great test for Stingley and evaluating Kisarian where that pick's got to now. Mr. Kenyon, I was critical of him earlier, but I think he's going to have to show up in a way that he's certainly not done in the last two games against that front, because it is relentless. And ironically, he'll be going up against Jordan Davis, so you'll probably never get a truer test in year one of who's a more aptly developed and acclimated player to the NFL of those two high picks. And I think you'll see that player in front of you, which gives us a good evaluation, and that's something to watch in the game, certainly, because I think he needs a bounce back, Kenyon, and what better way to do it against a guy that the other teams picked over you just a couple of spots above you when your team traded back. So it's going to be another buzzsaw of a run game and a quarterback who seems to have found some accuracy. Reminded me of the game I think when they played against in the college championship semi-final. That was the game that I thought Hurts could potentially make something of himself at the pros, and it's kind of coming together in quite a nice way. But yeah, one hell of a roster, and I think they're only undefeated team, but it certainly looks like a mismatch. Just as we have quite a few offenses and defenses we're going to play coming up. Because with this game, Brandon, do you have any expectations? Because I think when you look at this, and it's potentially more of a slide as we keep going, and then when you slide again 1-6-1, and you start to look at the teams coming up, I struggle to see where they're going to get a win.
No, a win. No, I think this is going to be a lot like the Titans game, except it's just going to be a bit more of a blowout. I think it's going to be more. See, the Titans didn't have the fact that they had Malik Willis out there as their quarterback. They weren't really able to fully exploit how bad the Texans were. They just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, and that's one thing that they know the Texans are bad off. You got the best running back in football, and you got the worst run defense in football. Perfect storm for them. But here you have got a competent quarterback in Jalen Hurts, somebody that I've been wrong about. I didn't think he'd be as good as he has been this year, so credit to him. But I think it's going to be a blowout.
Yeah,
quite honestly, man. No. Especially because more than anything, I mentioned the quarterback. I think that's a big part of it, but like just the physicality part of it. Like, are they just going to all of a sudden become a more physical football team over the next 4 days? Like is it just a matter of pride? Was that actually somewhere in there and they didn't show it? Getting pushed around the way that they did on Sunday.
Yeah.
Like I don't see that. I got another criticism though of the offense before we get out of here that we didn't get to because we have talked so much about Davis Mills and Pep Hamilton, kind of the spotlight being on them and Kenyon Green also. The wide receivers don't get separation. Like that was pointed out on the broadcast. These guys, and I mentioned Nico Collins not being out there, but a legit criticism of Pep and the offense of them not stretching the field, not really throwing it downfield. They tried it a couple times, and he tried to force it in blanketed coverage to Philip Dorsett. I think it also to Brandon Cooks as well. And I know you mentioned in the notes before we got on here about like the route running and the route trees. Like, I don't know if it's an issue of design as much. Like, obviously that issue with the tight ends and the Davis Mills interception was an issue with either design and execution or both. But as far as like them going deep, they're just throwing go balls and don't have man beaters, and it's just like that's another thing where with the Davis Mills thing, like I don't think he's got elite in him, but when you talk about putting him in a bad position, and you mentioned that Pep Hamilton's done so, I'm not disagreeing. I think Nick Caserio's put him in an even worse position. Thank God he got him a running back, but those receivers are awful. As a group, I don't think that they are. Any one is necessarily awful, but none of them are good enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big issue. It's just the skill position. I think there can be no doubt it's been underserved. I don't think you need the best, skill positions to fully evaluate an offense scheme or a quarterback in itself. But yeah, it's just not good enough. And I think it's going to be another sorry mess, I think, on Thursday night. And as I said in the article, I think the only highlight of these two games both at home, both the ability to derail your season. I think the highlight is potentially the Battle Red helmet. I don't think it's going to get much better than that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We've never seen it other than other than just the kind of the preseason or the training camp reveal, I guess it was, or maybe they practiced in them once, but we've never seen it in game. I have been one that's been critical of the lack of sort of change over the years in their not just not the color scheme necessarily, but in their uniforms and sort of what they've done. And so I'm actually excited to see that. I do wish, though, talk about things being wasted. Now, DJ Reader would have been wasted on this team. I hate wasting good gear on sorry. Like, that's going to be a fresh helmet, man. I'm going to like it. And it's a damn shame that that's going to be the football team that we're going to have to watch. That's what they're going to put out there. I'm hoping we see some of the good that they've done at various times over the season. Like, I mean, we're criticizing. It's not like it's been all bad all the time, you know.
It was a particular low Sunday.
It was very particular. It's been mostly bad, especially offensively, but there have been some highlights. There have been some moments, and they just have yet to ever put together a complete game. And then, obviously Sunday was their worst. So if there was a time to feel optimistic about them going up against the best team in the league, or I wouldn't call them the best team in the league, but at least the only undefeated team in the league, certainly probably the best team in the NFC. The worst time would be coming off a loss like the one that they experienced Sunday against the Titans.
Yeah, it's a short week. There'll be no hiding places again. I don't think they'll risk anybody that's injured on the short week. I think it's a recipe for trouble. So we could be Collins-less again on both sides of the ball. And I think, it's going to be a similar outcome, I think. Anything you're looking forward to in the rest of the season? Let me know if you can make Dallas, because I'm looking forward to that. That's about the only thing, it's just being there. Because I don't like watching these games on TV. It's just that even in an empty stadium, I'd rather be there than not. But anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious, right? I mean, that's the 3 weeks, that 3 week span, I'm looking forward to. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's coming back. That's going to be drama for us at the radio station.
Yeah.
But the December 4th game with the Browns coming here is going to be something I'm looking forward to. But that's a 3 week stretch of Browns, Cowboys. I will be in Dallas, so I will have to check you out.
Excellent.
Or at least that's the plan right now.
Cool.
So we've got Browns, Cowboys, and Chiefs in a 3 week span. And that's probably the stretch that I'm looking forward to most, because obviously you finish it off with the division opponents who, I've seen all three of them now, and gotta tell you, don't necessarily have to watch them anymore.
Yeah.
So
I think Washington and then those 3 games at the end are your potential only wins. The only one you really want to win from a draft perspective, and hopefully it's the Browns are playing the Bengals tonight, Monday Night Football. So hopefully Bengals and Burrow do us a favor.
Would you pick them? So I said this weeks ago, and let's see, has it played out? It did not. So I guess they did finally get that win against the Jaguars. But I said before that, after they lost to the Bears, here's what I did. After they lost to the Bears, okay, so that's week 3. They're at that point, 0-2-1, right? I said I'm not picking them to win a game. Not that they aren't going to win a game, because undoubtedly they will.
Yeah.
But just matchup by matchup, game by game. Because the Bears in that moment, and the Bears even look a lot better than they did at that time.
Yeah.
But at the time of that game, I said, man, they lost to the Bears. At the time, the only offense that I thought was worse than their own that they would face all year. And you probably can make a case maybe for the Commanders. I don't know. They got Terry McLaurin. But like I thought at the time, there's no way for the rest of the year that I can credibly and honestly pick them to win a game. Even though I know that they will win one, I just can't pick them to do so in any given week. That's how I felt at the time. Now they beat Jacksonville, but I still feel this way for the rest of the year. Like, 'cause I'm saying, I'm bringing this up because you mentioned the schedule and getting the win. I'm looking at it like, I don't see it. I'm not picking them. And not saying that they won't win one. I just can't pick it.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville and the Colts are probably a good chance. There's familiarity there. It brings the two teams closer in terms of any kind of talent levels, and the familiarity just kind of dispels some of that. So I think, yeah, there's an opportunity to potentially there. Washington beat Indy yesterday in Indy, so anything's possible. If you can't stop the run, your defense is just so fundamentally flawed. It's
Yeah,
you're not
and
functional.
that's the issue with the division teams, though. Like, think about it.
Yeah,
None of the teams in this division have an elite quarterback right now, but all of them have what you could argue is an elite running back if Jonathan
yeah,
Taylor's healthy.
yeah,
I would say all four of the teams. And so, like, as bad as the teams are in the division, and as familiarity breeds some comfort for you when you're going up against your division teams, the one strength that each team in this division has goes up against the Texans' weakness, and that's defending the run.
yeah.
All three of these division teams can run the ball all up and down the Texans.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're watching that yesterday, I don't know why any coach that's worth their salt game plan is just not to run it.
Yeah,
60% of the time, and that will give you more than enough chance, unless we come out some sort of offensive flurry of productivity this season. It's certainly there, but look, it makes the draft more interesting. I loved the draft process last year. It's going to be great again this year. It's going to be great again the year after. It's in Kansas City this year, which is a great place for it. Shape's got no hotels because it's going to be difficult to go, I think, now. But yeah, I think it's as you said, it's not the best term, but it is a process, and it's going to take a while. But if guys don't pan out, you're not left with much. So we'll see. But it's more of a evaluation of these guys, and we'll see. But there's got to be some big, hopefully, bounce back games in the coming weeks. But I don't think Philadelphia on a short week is the one to do it, because they run too much. They have plays that they keep going to, and teams can't stop. And you see them do that every week. And I think we're certainly not going to have the answers. So the golf will be too much. I think we'll be here next week talking about something. But final point, trade deadline is tomorrow, I think. 12 p.m. Eastern, I think 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. Do you see Cook's going out? He still played a lot of snaps yesterday, so I would take anything for anyone that's not a rookie, and I mean anything. If it's a 2024 7th round pick, I would take it, to be honest, at this stage. I don't really... opportunities to bring in players needs to be as broad and as extensive as possible.
Yeah, I'm not as caught up on the compensation as a lot of people would be. I think a fifth would be reasonable for him, but the issue here and the reason why I'm predicting that it doesn't happen is because it seems like his contract being guaranteed next year is a hang-up. And I don't know if he is enough of a difference maker for a team to want to do that. Like if he was, like, it's not like we're talking about Odell Beckham being on the market. As much as respect as Brandon Cooks has, like that, like I'm trying to envision a team, and we just haven't seen it yet, that's gonna be willing to do that. Like Green Bay seems like the perfect fit for him, but they're a little frugal over there. You know what I mean? And got some, their track record on how they make decision makers with their skill positions, with their receivers, does not indicate that they would want to take on Brandon Cooks and his salary for next year. It'd be great for the Texans if they would, for whatever. I'm with you on the compensation part of it. I'm just real curious to see how that part of it plays out.
Yeah. I think if they got a fourth for Cooks, you'd be laughing. A third, ideally. But yeah, that contract being guaranteed, again, it would just keep, whatever reason, if it's guaranteed more money for rookies and pissing all the agents off, or guaranteeing money, bringing back guys that, giving them guarantees for next year. Kirksey's, was given a 2-year deal. The second he leaves, things will be better. I just think Steven Nelson's a guy I'd probably shop. I think he's probably got some value. Jerry Hughes has probably got some value on paper, just as a 20-30 snap guy in a game. But beyond that, I think there's not many. There's not many assets, and there's not probably a lot of willing suitors that are willing to give up much.
What do you think is keeping Tunsil from being dealt? Is it the money?
Money. It's always about money or women, isn't it? That's the two. And isn't it? So yeah, I think he's his contract. Well, you can't franchise tag him because of the number he's on, because of all the backloaded money. So it makes that almost impossible, I think. Shout out to Troy, who I heard state that, and that's I'll cite him on that one.
I figure I just mentioned that one.
Yeah, I think so. No, I mean, again, if somebody came and said, "Look, here's a third round pick or something," I mean, just to sell him two and a bit years after 2 firsts and a second, I suppose you probably have to get at least a second to do it to make it worthwhile on paper. But he's playing at a level where you probably want to keep him, as one, because I think if you can get him and Titus locked in, which I don't think they'll do, by the way. They'll only keep one or the other, if I've had to hazard a guess. I just can't see them paying both. Whereas they probably should pay them both, because then it gives you some sort of strength in one area.
Well, you know what? I thought that at the time when they exercised when they picked up Titus's option, but Titus hasn't been that great either.
Well, he's got better the last few weeks. I think the first few weeks were ropey, but I think he's grown into it, I think. But he's certainly not commanding an extension.
It's a mixed bag right now. You know, so like it's not as easy of an answer as it was when they first picked up his extension.
But I think from a practical viewpoint, to replace a left tackle that plays at the level Tunsil does, and he's getting stuck in the run game, which he's never done before, and I don't know why that is this year. It's come alive. Well, I know why it is, because he wants to get paid again. But to find a right tackle in the draft is probably a lot easier than it is to find a quality left tackle, and you can find a guy who's played left, stick him on right, and then he's potentially a succession plan. But hey ho, there's not many option lines, but we've done about an hour and 20 or something there. So thank you for your time, mate. Always appreciated. I'll let you go on. I'm sure you got 101 things to do, and go Astros tonight. Beat a couple of games, and the antithesis in which the way the Texans have been run, off-field slander aside, I think talent acquisition, development of young players, use of analytics, finding, gems in the rough is something that they've done to a level that's unprecedented in most, pro sports. So I think when they lost to the Nationals, did they lose last year as well? They've beat it so fucking many, I've lost count. So
they lost last year to Atlanta. I was
Atlanta,
I was sitting there in center field watching that those damn Braves fans do the racist tomahawk chop thing that they do after they beat the Astros in our home ballpark. So I was there for that.
The Nationals. You've had the loss to the Atlanta. So I think if from an outsider's looking at it, my baseball knowledge is pretty minimal, apart from the games I've been in, what I hear about the Astros, via the Texans. But I think if they only win one out of that vintage of players, it's perhaps an underachievement. I think that would be the biggest kind of regret for everybody involved. So if you get two, the Rockets got those two all those years ago, and you see the banners hanging up there, people don't forget it. And I was in Houston when they won it. I was in Austin the night they won it, and then I was in Houston on the day of the parade. And it was one of the best days I've ever had in my life, because it was just the atmosphere, the elation, what it means to people, all those 100 lost seasons, to be run so well, have this period, and not to win more than one is a bit of an underachievement. So I really, really hope they do it. It was tough, obviously, game one with a 5-run lead, blowing that. So, but, if, the top three guys on the order come alive, there's always a chance. And the pitching this year's just been phenomenal from everything I've watched. So it's been the big thing. But you never know. You're in a position there where the GM and the head coach might be out even if they win it. So
it's a very unique situation where you have a team that's been wildly successful and they've got such an uncertain future in management from the manager and the general manager. Like neither one might be back. Now it seems like Dusty Baker wants to be back and that Jim Crane might want him back, but it's an open secret that it's an icy relationship between the owner and the general manager for whatever reason. So that's awkward. But in terms of what this means, this series, what it means for the Astros, their fans, the city of Houston, and this whole run and the context of it all, like you laid it out, between 2019 losing to Washington, the Washington Nationals, and last year, 2021, losing to the Atlanta Braves, neither of those teams were supposed to beat the Astros. Like the Astros have been the favorite ever since they won. You could argue in 2017 when they actually won that the Dodgers were like, they were neck and neck. That series obviously went 7 games, and those teams were evenly matched. You could argue that the Dodgers were better and that the Astros just kind of proved themselves to be better throughout that series. But there's no question about it with the Nationals team was not a team that was expected to be there. I want to say they won. I don't think they'd won even 90 games. The Atlanta team, same thing, hadn't won 90 games. This Phillies team hadn't won 90 games, kind of come out of nowhere, put their team together, makeshift over the course of the season, and not supposed to beat the juggernaut Astros. So if they lose this World Series, okay, if they lose this World Series, it would be the biggest disappointment of them all. And I'm saying that as somebody who lived through 2019, when that was a huge disappointment, when the road team won every game, which at disadvantaged Astros since they had the majority of the home games. Yeah.
No, well, good luck to them. Hopefully they're doing something right for the city, and it's not often you get a championship in one of the major sports, so hopefully it can happen. And but you got 3 road games, right, before you bring it back.
Well, so. Underrated storyline here for you, especially for you being across the way, is that if this thing goes back to Houston, right, assuming that neither team wins all 3 games in Philly, the Texans and the Eagles will play on the day between travel. So so that whole city this week, the American cities of Philadelphia and Houston are at odds.
Yeah.
Because the baseball teams are fighting for the World Series, and their football team is about to come here and stomp a mud hole in ours. We already know it. But right in between there, we're competing for a World Series. So we'll see what a disaster it would be for Houston to lose, because you're going to lose to the Eagles on Thursday. But what a disaster it would be to also lose to them in Houston in the World Series on one of those subsequent days, whether it be Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
That all of that is in play at this moment as we record this podcast, and something to kind of like an underrated city to city storyline. So
I think I saw was it McLean said there's potential for rain, so therefore it could delay one of the games and then push it back, and they could end up playing on Thursday as well. So
that's true. Yep. That's also true. Yep.
That'll divert everybody's attention. I'm sure Amazon will be delighted about that if that is the case, for all the money they've paid. But hey ho, them's the breaks. But we'll see what happens. Brandon, appreciate you, man. Thank you very much for your time. We'll definitely we'll maybe try and do this in Dallas or something if we've got time. But we'll definitely grab a beer. I'm looking forward to that and meeting everybody there again, because it's what makes it bearable seasons like this, and it's pretty tough, and but good on you for keep slogging. If you're still listening, if you're still grinding with us, then we appreciate you. So thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week to talk Thursday night football and maybe some trades as well, and maybe a World Series winner. We'll see. But thanks again for listening to Turn Up For What podcast. We'll catch you again next week.